stuck in a corner. Sorry.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I think most of you here know me. My name's Kat Hope. I'm the Associate Dean of Research at WAPA. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here to Jonathan Marshall's book launch. Jonathan started with WAPA as the Higher Degrees Coordinator at the beginning of this year, but his history with WAPA goes back further than that. He was the postdoctoral fellow when I just started as an academic, and he was a big influence and inspiration to me at a time when I think you were the only other person who knew anything about experimental music, and I work in the music department, so that's a little bit alarming. But it's been a great pleasure, Jonathan, to work with you this year, and I really want to take this opportunity to congratulate you on your book.
Yep. Watch out for the booby trap. All right, many thanks for that, Kat. There's a lot of thank yous. I might do them at the end. I kind of want to just talk a little bit about the book to start with. And this is a very appropriate place to have a launch like this. A place which is groaning with old books, with photographs, with books with tables and descriptions, because that's what I immersed myself in when I did the original research for this text. And, you know, I'm now at the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts, right? So you kind of think, well, this sort of world doesn't seem at first glance to be connected to performance. Many people, when they think of photographs and books, they think of them as sort of dead and still and static. Now, the reason that my topic kind of appealed to me, and one of the things I really explore in the text, is that tension between the recording of the mobile moving body and the kind of texts, photos, descriptions that you see here is a big one when you're discussing a discipline like neurology. Neurology is principally a medical discourse about movement, about behaviour, and it has implications for psychology, but in a lot of ways neurological illnesses are kind of choreographic. They're about what kinds of seizures, what sort of shapes the body makes. Now, if you're going to start describing these, and at 19th century neurology was, a new discipline. It never really existed as a formal way of thinking about health and disease. How are you going to do that? And remember, this is a period before cinematography. The period I'm discussing in the 1880s, you just had stop-motion photography emerging, but cinematography hadn't shown up. So how are you going to do that? Well, obviously you interact with the patients directly, you watch their seizures, their performances, and when you're teaching, you get the patients up there. So that's exactly what my figure and those associated with him did. They did these performances, ultimately theatrical pieces, and they analyse and stage manage the performances they're watching, much like a theatrical stage manager does. It's really, the phrase I use is dramaturgical. It's a theatrical style of analysing and describing the body. Clearly, though, from a scientific point of view, and especially a new science, which is still quite radical, this is its strength, but it's also kind of a bit problematic. I mean, my goodness, we have scientists and physicians who are doing something that looks like theatre. And one of the illnesses that Charcot was discussing was hysteria, or as he preferred to call it, hysterio-epilepsy, because it was defined by seizure, by epileptic-like seizure, not really behavioural at all. So you had these extraordinary, over-the-top seizures and events happening on the stage while this very calm man sort of describes what's going on. And this was, frankly, something of a scandal. Charcot was compared to Wagner. He was called a thaumaturg. One person said that he gives us the spectacle of demonic possession, but unlike what Charcot himself claimed, he doesn't actually tell us what they have properly. So you get into discussions of aesthetics in the world of science and medicine. And what also comes out, and I'll try and kind of round up soonish, is that therefore a particular model of the healthy body is an aesthetic model for a start. So one of the things I've spent a chapter describing is the neoclassical body. Ultimately, Charcot's students and colleagues end up at the School of Fine Arts, and they teach people like Duchamp and stuff. You can see some of this in his paintings. I'll discuss that with you afterwards if anyone's interested in that link. You have these people teaching at the School of Fine Arts, and they say that the classical athlete, preferably naked and moving and masculine and defending the Republic, that is the model of the healthy body. And you're using things like the Parthenon as your models. And so, oh gee, I wonder what the unhealthy body is. Well, guess what? It's avant-garde art at this point. And that connection is explicitly made by a guy called Max Nordau, although it's really throughout the work here. Now, if you're discussing this kind of dichotomy of the body, the problem then happens, what happens to you as an audience member? Now, remember this is neurology, right? So we've got reflexive nerve actions. You hit your knee and it bounces off in a particular way. A lot of the people that Charcot was describing, he claimed that they had latent illness, which was brought on by traumatic events, sometimes accidents, sometimes personal experiences, occasionally experiences watching art. So if you take that logic and you think, why is it that Charcot's patrician individuals watching his performances don't also go crazy and start having seizures? And, that point is actually made by several of Charcot's colleagues. So the really extraordinary final aspect of the book and discusses in the last chapter is the Théâtre de Grand Guignol, a horror theatre. Now, several of Charcot's students ended up writing for this outrageously scandalous theatre, which was all about rape and massacre and people going crazy. And they claimed that they were depicting how people went crazy. And, kind of the sort of events that would happen to an individual that might drive them to this. But the theatre itself used shocking sound effects, great stories about how the sounds would come up from underneath the seats while you're watching. And, so effectively the theatre itself quite deliberately brings on, and this is explicitly described by one of the major authors, a miniature seizure in the audience member. So by the end of Charcot's period, and after his death, we're talking kind of by now into the early 1900s, this distinction which Charcot really wanted to make between I am good, solid patrician doctor describing the diseased and also offering a model of the healthy body, and this kind of frenetic modern world in which we're all becoming infected, that distinction completely collapses. So that's kind of what the book traces. If you're interested, we do have copies on sale. I should point out it is actually a quite literally unprecedented price because it's the author's price, so you're not going to get it anywhere if you don't get it tonight, or you could email me if you get really stuck. I do just kind of want to round out by giving a few thank yous to join Kat in thanking Rob and Janet for hosting this, very kind of them, and as I said, it's a perfect setting really. To thank Kat because the people who are part of this story, as Kat has pointed out, I kind of felt like in many ways we sort of co-mentored each other. We were both kind of going, Jesus, what happens now in our lives? So we were swapping articles, so this book wouldn't have been the book that it is without that input, so really thanks for that, Kat. And also there's a few people who aren't here, obviously my supervisors originally, they're listed in the acknowledgements, but Joy DeMusi and Charles Sauwine, absolutely stellar academics, and Joy is still at Melbourne, so if you're around in Melbourne, look up Joy DeMusi, she's great. But also a few absent people, the late Maggie Phillips, who was at WAPA, who I worked with very closely, well we all at WAPA worked very closely with, and she read more of these drafts than she ever wanted to. And also my mother. My mother actually read my entire thesis. I mean, you can kill oxen with these things, right? They are big documents. She read the entire thing at least 3 times. She gave me incredibly detailed notes. She died earlier this year, so, 2 absent friends. And with that, I declare the book launched. Continue to party.
We have to restage some of those before.